thank you for that splendid introduction. I will attempt to live up to it. Can everyone hear me? No. Oh, I have to. I'm really bad at microphones. Really bad at microphones. Okay, I have to now not move until I'm done with the story. So, as usual with these things, I was kind of wondering, well, what will I read? What will I read? And the wonderful students who are at Clarion West this year, who are extraordinary writers and people, have been really brave in terms of showing everyone work that is, in process, sometimes unfinished, certainly, not yet published. So I thought that I would read a brand new story that is making the rounds. And my husband has read this, and my sister has, and you're now its first major audience. It is called Lucite. The 10th circle of hell is a gift shop. Andrew, tired and dispirited, wanders among the predictable displays, t-shirts and refrigerator magnets, bottles of fire and brimstone hot sauce, racks of postcards and cheap costume jewelry and coffee mugs. They have 30 minutes to shop before the tour bus, filled with a group of sullen church youth groups and subdued adults, takes them back home. Midway through my life, I became lost in a dark wood. Andrew knew how the poem started even before their guide, a pot-bellied minor imp with no resemblance to Virgil, gave them his droning lecture at the beginning of the tour. Abandon all hope, ye who enter here, and that will be $99.95 plus tax. At least they get to recover their hope when they leave. Andrew, for his part, is very much hoping for a hearty salad and a beer this evening. He plans to avoid cooked meat for a while. The gift shop sells many different translations of Dante's Inferno. Andrew sidesteps the bookshelves and finds himself facing a back wall displaying framed insects. Butterflies and beetles, he thinks, and wonders what they're doing here. Cockroaches and stinging midges would be more like it, and moves closer to examine them. They aren't butterflies or beetles, not quite. They have too many legs or not enough, eyes in odd places, tiny mouths with teeth. The larger ones are framed, but a number of small ones inhabit lucite blocks, some designed as paperweights and some as keychains. The Souls of the Damned reads a display card, listing prices ranging from $7.95 for the keychains to $150 for some of the larger souls with brightly colored wings. Andrew's stomach clenches. The damned have already sold their souls one way or another, although Andrew isn't sure he knows anyone who hasn't. How can they be sold again? And aren't those the souls he's been watching for the last 5 hours as they endured their various torments? Tacky fridge magnets are one thing. This is different, much more personal. It bothers Andrew as much as anything he's seen today. He feels a hot breeze blow past his cheek and turns to find the minor imp watching him. Properly speaking, these are just the shells of the souls, no more inhabited than any shell you pick up on the beach. The actual souls you've seen, suffering for their sins, they're the meat of the matter. These have no actual value, but they're pretty. The really big ones, the grand ones, they're in storage. These are the minor souls. No value, but still fetching anywhere from $8 to several $100s. Andrew feels his face tightening. The imp gives him an odd half smile, almost of sympathy, and says, "They're among our best-selling items. Where else here can you find beauty?" Andrew doesn't answer. He turns back to the display, eager to be rid of the imp who has evoked low-level panic in him throughout the tour. It's a myth that the devil himself makes the deals and collects on them, the imp told them. Some of you know that from reading the screw tape letters. Really, another species of human vanity. None of you is that important. A servant like me is much more likely to be the one doing the job. Andrew finds himself reaching for one of the paperweights. The soul captured within it is yellow and orange, the colors of sunlight and butterflies and popsicles. He maneuvers around the minor imp, who, sneering, refuses to move for him, and carries his purchase to the register, which accepts cash in the currency of every nation, as well as an impressive variety of credit and debit cards. Andrew pays cash, handing over $15 to another minor imp, this one bored and sluggish. What happens to the money? Beg pardon? The imp raises a lumpish eyebrow and then yawns, affording Andrew a view of a pale, pulsing gullet that will show up in his nightmares for weeks. The money. What do you do with it? What does money mean here? The imp considers him, head cocked, and then shrugs. Oh, it doesn't mean anything to us. It means something to you. This place is about taking what you hold dear, or should, and giving you something in exchange that's worthless. Haven't you learned that yet? He, she, it, puts the lucite block in a paper bag along with a square of cardboard and shoves it at Andrew. Here you go. Enjoy. Maybe we'll be seeing you again. Andrew takes the bag and realizes that he's shaking. Back home, where he immediately opens all the windows to flood his house with the smell of cut grass and the sound of bird song, all the sweetness of summer, he removes his purchase from the bag and puts it on his desk. Looking at it brings an odd heaviness to his limbs. It really is beautiful, something like a moth and something like a hummingbird, with feathery antennae and delicate clawed feet and lacy, fiery wings. Crumpling the bag to toss it, he feels resistance and reaches in to remove the piece of cardboard. A receipt of some sort, surely, or a coupon for a second visit to Inferno at discount rates. Those were in plentiful supply throughout the tour, although no one was taking them. But no, it's an information card. Soul number 99364271 Herbert Jonathan McManus, 1940 to 2012. Sold in 1965 for box seat at baseball stadium. Andrew blinks. He anchors the card under the paperweight and goes into the kitchen to make dinner. As he chops onions and sautés frozen shrimp, he finds himself trying to imagine what could have driven McManus's choice. The desire to impress an employer or a woman? Surely no one can love baseball that much. But he would have been 25 in 1965. He would have been a young man, and the young, as Andrew has just dimly begun to discern, being only a little past that threshold himself, cannot imagine ever dying. Andrew eats his dinner and then settles down to watch TV, but he's restless, unable to concentrate. He flips channels and finds everything vacuous. He turns off the TV, goes back into the kitchen, reaches for the ice cream in the freezer, and then pauses. He bought the ice cream because he's on vacation, a week off his IT job. He bought the ice cream even though his doctor's been telling him his cholesterol is too high. He suddenly no longer wants ice cream. He leaves it unopened and returns to his bedroom, where Herbert McManus's soul glows softly in the dim sunset light from the window. Andrew sits at his desk, elbows braced on the wood, and gazes at the paperweight. He wonders if Herbert McManus had any idea what his soul looked like. He wonders what his own looks like. He goes to his computer, powers it up, and types Herbert Jonathan McManus, 1940 to 2012, into the search box. Here's a very brief obituary. Herbert Jonathan McManus, age 72, died of heart failure last Saturday in Babbling Brook Nursing Home in Whirligig, Pennsylvania. That's it. There's no mention of friends, family, career, no mention of where the man was born or educated. No mention of baseball, even. But Whirligig is only 2 hours from here. What, Andrew wonders, are the odds of his drawing so near a neighbor from his blind grab at the lucite cubes? He shivers in the warm breeze from the window and remembers the minor imp. Had his choice been free or determined in advance or somehow coerced? He wonders if he saw McManus on the tour, but there were so many damned, their features contorted by eternities of agony. They blended into one another, a vast suffering mass, nearly devoid of individuality. Or maybe the individuality was there, and Andrew just didn't have the courage to look for it. He goes back to his desk and contemplates the lucite block. When he touches it, it feels cool, inert. Dante says that it's a sin to feel pity for the damned. But Andrew, even with the minor imp of Google at his command, doesn't know enough about McManus even to pity him. He wants to pity McManus, or at least understand him. He wants to break the rules. He wants this one unimportant soul, so easily dismissed by the minor imp, to matter to someone. He puts the lucite block on his bedside table, gets into his pajamas, and goes to sleep. If he's going to drive to Whirligate tomorrow, he needs to be rested. He's up early the next morning, which dawns cool and clear. He drives to his local Starbucks for a latte and an almond croissant, and then hits the road, his GPS guiding him with its soothing, mechanical voice, female and British accented. Part of the route is highway dominated by belching trucks, but at last he exits into peaceful farmland dotted with cows and sheep and Amish buggies, all of it like something out of a Norman Rockwell painting. He glances at the seat beside him, where the lucite block sits unwrapped, but it looks just like it did at home. Somehow he had an idea that as it neared Herbert McManus's last earthly residence, it would brighten or darken, change somehow. He finds the nursing home with no trouble. It's old and drab, and when he goes inside, the lucite tucked into the oversized pocket of a sweater he wore for exactly this purpose, his nose itches from the smell of disinfectant. He's about to lie. He doesn't lie often, and he's not very good at it. He wonders what will happen if he gets caught. He doesn't see how anything can happen. He isn't committing a crime. He's scared anyway. He swallows. "May I help you?" A tired-looking woman in a rumpled uniform, wearing a name tag that says Donna, comes out of an office and smiles at him. Andrew clears his throat. Yes, I recently learned that an old friend of my father's died. A childhood friend of my dad's. None of us had seen him in years, but the obituary said he died here. And I wondered if I could talk to someone who knew him. My father died a few years back. This is true. And, well, I'm looking for connections. Herbert McManus? I'd like to give my condolences to his family if I can. I couldn't find any information about them. He died a few years ago, so I don't know if anyone here even remembers him. Her face has softened. I remember Herbie, yes. I didn't know him well. One of our aides spent more time with him than I did. Let me see if she can talk to you. She turns and flags down a woman pushing a pail on wheels. Angie, can you ask Rosalita to come up front here, please? There's someone who wants to meet her. Rosalita is short and squat with an unremarkable face. Donna shows her and Andrew to a small room with card tables, all unoccupied. Can I get you some tea or coffee, she asks Andrew, and he asks for water before giving Rosalita the same speech he gave Donna. He hopes Rosalita knows more about Herbert, but also hopes she doesn't know enough to detect his deceit. Your daddy knew Herbie when he was little. She clucks and shakes her head. And you're here because of the obituary? Such a shame. No one ever visited him. He didn't have any family that we heard about, and it takes his dying to get someone to come here. You know, I wish we could publish a list of the names of all the folks who are here, put it in the newspaper, put it on billboards, and say, if you know any of these people, come visit because they need you. But we can't. Privacy laws. There's too much privacy, if you ask me. Andrew nods and thinks about his small, neat house. Too much privacy. Tell me what Herbie was like. Oh, honey, by the time we got him, he wasn't like much of anything. Alzheimer's. But he was a sweet man, always said please and thank you. Sometimes he had nightmares, and I'd go in and hold his hand, and he'd hang on to it for dear life. He was with us for a year before he died. Around here, that's a long time. I guess that's part of why I was so fond of him, but I can't really explain it. You just get a feeling about people, you know? Andrew takes a sip of the water Donna brought him. He tastes ash and brimstone. He never talked about the past? Oh no, that was gone. What did he do all day? She shrugs, looked out the window. He liked flowers, you know, and the leaves when they turned in the fall. Watched TV sometimes. I don't think he had any idea what anything on TV meant, unless there was music. He loved music, but most of them do, the Alzheimer's patients. Big band stuff, Elvis, Buddy Holly, whatever they listened to when they were young. Did he ever watch baseball? Andrew reaches into his pocket to touch the lucite cube, which contains a soul the color of flowers and autumn leaves, and gathers courage for a lie. He loved baseball. He and my father played pickup games when they were kids, and he played ball for his high school. He dreamed of the majors, Dad said, but he wasn't good enough. Rosalita brightens. Really? I never knew that. He never had any reaction to baseball that I saw, but who knows what was going on inside. There was a thing he did sometimes, looked like he was throwing something. I thought maybe he'd been a fisherman and was imagining casting a line, but maybe it was a baseball, you know? Maybe, Andrew says. Rosalita reaches out and puts a hand on his. Listen, his bed's empty at the moment. It won't be for long, but the person who was just there left us last night, and his roommate's in the day room patting the therapy dogs. Thank God for those dogs. Do you want to see his room? Yes, I'd like that very much. It's not great, she warns him as they walk down the corridor, but I guess you know that. These places never are. But he had the bed next to the window, and that's something. It looks out on our little garden and some trees. Flowers and autumn leaves, Andrew says, and runs a finger along the smooth surface of the lucite. Today, all they see from the window is green. They stand looking out, the two of them, their backs to the drab room with its stripped bed near the window and its small set of trinkets arranged around the other bed near the door. Some family photos, some old man clothing hanging in the closet, a teddy bear, a lap blanket crocheted, Rosalita explains, by volunteers who make things for the residents but never deliver them themselves. The green is lovely, soothing, the color of hope and new life. Andrew tries to remember if there was anything green in Inferno at all, but no, it was all black and gray and red, even in the circle of avarice. I'm glad he had the bed next to the window, he says. Rosalita nods. Those are the good beds. Tell me more about him, since I can't tell you much, and tell me about your daddy. She touches his hand again. I'm sorry for your loss. Thank you. Andrew hadn't been close to his father. He isn't close to anyone. Too much privacy. In truth, he knows little more about his father than he and Rosalita do about Herbert McManus, barely enough to fill a square of cardboard. But he combines things he knows are true with things he wants to be true, and finds himself telling a story. His grandfather died in World War II when his father was a child, and his grandmother worked at a diner where Herbert's daddy was a cook. The two became friends over pieces of pie. Herbie favored chocolate cream, while Andrew's father, Jim, preferred cherry, and games played in the empty lot behind the diner. After a while, other boys began to gather there too, enough for two scruffy baseball teams, and he's just about to launch into a story about how a professional baseball scout who had stopped at the diner for ice cream saw one of the games and encouraged the boys. Pure Hollywood, pure cornball. Why would anyone believe such a thing? When Donna pokes her head into the room. Rosalita, I'm sorry to interrupt, but Maisie needs you down the hall. Rosalita, who's been listening and smiling, snaps to, yes, of course. She reaches out to squeeze Andrew's arm, says, I need to get back to work. It was so nice to meet you. Thank you for telling me about Herbie and your father. You're welcome, Andrew says. He leaves the room after her. He has no right to be there, not really. No right to be in this building at all. He leaves quickly, shoulders hunched, but then finds himself circling the building. He wants to see the gardens and trees without any glass in the way. There's a bench. He sits and takes the lucite block out of his pocket. It does seem brighter now, but that must be just a trick of the light, because it's not alive anymore. He almost holds the lucite up anyway, as if to show Herbert McManus leaves and flowers, but then puts it back into his pocket. His grandfather really was killed in World War II. His grandmother really did work in a diner where her only child spent countless hours doing homework, helping to count forks, playing games with sugar packets. There was pie sometimes, but no baseball. Andrew's father was no better at friendship than he himself is. He thinks about Herbert McManus, who sold his soul for a box seat at the game, and who decades later, when he remembered nothing else, still made a motion with his arm that might or might not have been like throwing a baseball. Did he want the seat to impress friends, or people he wanted to be friends with? There's no way to know. It's all lost. Andrew sits on the bench for a while longer, idly watching squirrels and birds. Then he gets back into his car and drives back home. His neat little house feels very empty. He eases the lucite block out of his pocket and puts it back on his desk, fixes and eats a sandwich and salad, and once again skips the ice cream. He signed up for the Inferno tour on a whim because he'd enjoyed a college Dante course. The class had been one of his rare forays into the humanities. Back then, he'd been vaguely thinking about designing a computer game based on the Divine Comedy, but he found himself unexpectedly engaged by the poetry. And on a week's vacation, why not visit the real thing? The tour was something to do, something interesting. But the minor imp chilled Andrew from his first words. You're all here for a reason. Some of you don't even recognize it yet. I'd tell you to pay attention, but you humans aren't very good at that. The imp laughed, not a villain's movie cackle, but an amused grandfatherly chuckle, and Andrew felt his gorge rising. Sitting at his kitchen table, he remembers the gift shop, remembers thinking that he wasn't sure he knew anyone whose soul wasn't already paid for. It's a very small sample, admittedly. The other tech geeks at his job, all of whom seem to have traded their souls for ones and zeros. The very few women he's unsuccessfully dated over the years, most of whom were slaves to work or chemicals. His father, deadened by useless regret. Has Andrew sold his soul already to the safety of loneliness? Is it possible to sell your soul without knowing it? He wishes he'd thought to ask the minor imp that question, although the desire isn't strong enough to make him want to take another tour. Restless, he gets up, goes to the window, and then walks outside to sit on his front step. He's a cliche. His father, his dates, his coworkers, the minor imp, Herbert McManus, Rosalita, they're all cliches. The story he told Rosalita is a cliche. His pondering their fate and his own is a cliche. He recognizes this as the sin of despair. It occurs to him that what isn't a cliche, the thing he couldn't have known to expect, couldn't have imagined, is McManus's soul, that startling creature trapped in cheap plastic. He gets up, goes back inside, fishes a pad out of a drawer, and finds some colored pencils he once used to rough out a chart for a client. He sits at his desk for a long time, the paper blank in front of him. His mind's blank, too. He hasn't drawn anything since grade school, and he wasn't especially good at it then. But he begins. He closes his eyes when he chooses the pencils and lets the pencils wander and begins to relax. Soon enough, he's produced a crude sketch of a small, odd beast, part squirrel and part mouse, with brightly liquid eyes and a horse's mane. It's turquoise and emerald green and gold. With each minute he works on it, he loves it more, yearns more fiercely for it or something like it to exist. As he finishes the drawing, he feels a somersaulting in his chest, a movement both energetic and inquisitive, and in its lucite cube, Herbert McManus's soul catches the sunset and flares brilliantly, a memory of flame. Thank you.